Today we're going to be talking about that conversation that you've been avoiding, that you don't want to have with your boss. That one that you're busy thinking about right now, yeah, that's the one that you actually need to have the most.
It shows that you as an employee have a really strong backbone and that you're actually willing to have that head-on conflict in order for what is not about who is right, but about what is right. Because this is a professional context, you're not dealing with a romantic partner, you're actually dealing with a colleague. If you can't have that difficult conversation with your boss, how are you supposed to handle when your client is blaming you for something? Having that difficult conversation, it's a skill. The more you practice it, the better you get.
Can you imagine a manager says to someone, just shut up and do your job?
That's
I'd probably lose my shit with that manager.
Yeah.
If you watched up until this point, then chances are there is a difficult conversation that you're avoiding, so don't avoid it. Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about that conversation that you've been avoiding, that you don't want to have with your boss. That one that you're busy thinking about right now, yeah, that's the one that you actually need to have the most. So we're going to be talking about how to have it and when.
It's important to have that conversation because it shows that you as an employee have a really strong backbone, that you can stick to your moral compass, and that you're actually willing to have that head-on conflict in order for what is not about who is right, but about what is right.
Yeah, I think it's also important to be able to put forward a cohesive argument that doesn't turn into an argument, but that you're actually able to put forward a case for why a decision needs to be made or something needs to change, whatever the case might be. It shows you to be more senior. You know, employers don't actually want, or good leaders, they don't really want people that are just yes people, that just do whatever always. We do actually want people that will challenge the status quo and think critically, but to communicate around their critical thoughts in a helpful, constructive way. People avoid difficult conversations because it can create conflict and fallout. And when it comes to your work environment, it's obviously your livelihood. And so the conversation is high stakes. And if it goes south, it can impact your career. And that's why I think people avoid it. Also, people naturally don't like conflict. Most people don't like conflict and they prefer to avoid it. But the problem is that by avoiding it, you're actually creating a problem that gets bigger and bigger. And you're actually creating a rift in your relationship with your employer and your colleagues. It doesn't help. I think another thing that's important to mention there is that with difficult conversations often comes change. And as we know, people don't naturally go towards change. And change is often quite uncomfortable. But people avoid something that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Something that does jump to mind is, I think there's two parties to the conversation. On the one end, it's about the person who's raising the conversation to the leader to have the ability to compose themselves emotionally and to put forward the facts and the merits and not make it personal. Argue about what's right, not who's right. So there's that part. And then there's also a massive responsibility, I believe, on the leader to be approachable, to be rational, to actually be interested to listen and to hear. So perhaps for some of you out there, if you feel that you really can't talk to your manager or your boss, it's maybe that in and of itself is a conversation that you need to have, because chances are they most likely want you to feel free and feel like you can have that conversation with them.
Yeah, there's definitely a correlation between the day-to-day relationship you have with your boss or manager and being able to have these difficult conversations. If you don't try and form a bridge on a day-to-day basis on some of the surface level items, you're going to find building that bridge on the difficult conversation quite hard as well. And so there is a bit of preamble involved where you've actually got to build good relationship. And then that makes having those difficult conversations much easier because you actually know, you know how this person works, you know how they like to be communicated with, and that person also knows how you like to be communicated with.
I love what you're saying there, because you're talking about the foundation that's going to be built consistently every day in the little interactions over time that builds a good relationship. I've seen a lot of guys and girls that come in that are really, really clever and highly educated and honestly highly skilled and top of their game. And they get so focused on the output and the performance side of things that they forget to just put a little bit of airtime into building a healthy, good quality relationship. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with being highly skilled and performing, and those are wonderful things. But when you forget about the relationship completely and you discard it as not important, I think that's short-sighted.
Well, people do business with people, and if you don't get that right, you miss the bus completely.
Completely.
Well, if you look at where we have been over the last, say, 5 to 30 years in terms of social constructs. If you look back quite a while ago, kids were told to, be seen and not heard. And so that probably has also pulled through into the work culture, because you say, right, well, your authority told you, be seen, not heard. Therefore, what do? You replicate that into your work environment. And so some people have that predisposition where they actually have to work really hard to grow out of that. Obviously, there's other kids that were raised in an environment that said, listen, if you have a question, raise it. If you want to debate something, you debate it. So everybody's coming off of a different base. But it doesn't change the fact that in the work environment, you need to be able to raise your game to be able to say, right, have that conversation. Because if you can't have that difficult conversation with your boss, how are you supposed to handle when your client is blaming you for something? And now suddenly you're just like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to avoid the conflict and I don't accept it, and I put the company's name into disrepute. That's not very helpful either.
I think the thing is that it comes back to core values and communicating what those core values are. I know for you and me, we share the same one, which is question everything. Just do it respectfully and do it constructively. Don't try and name and shame and flick mud at people, but question the status quo. Ask, does this still make sense? Is this really the best way to do it? And communicate to people that they must also ask these types of questions. Now, one of the things that frightens me, and I know it worries you as well, is that we might have this philosophy, but it won't always 100% of the time find its way into every corner of the business. There are sometimes leaders that slip through the cracks, who don't hold true to those ideals.
Yeah, and it's always a tough one identifying those, because you're not privy to the conversations that they aren't having.
Like, can you imagine if behind some door somewhere you've got a manager of ours that says to someone to shut up and do your job?
Yeah,
I'd probably lose my shit with that manager. No, I'd tell him to catch a wake up and go back to the heart of servant leadership and listen to what is that person moaning about. What is the moan behind the moan? What's the real issue? And just listen to what they're saying.
So what advice or thoughts around having a difficult conversation with your boss would you give to somebody if they're in this part where they've got that feeling, it's sinking right there, they know they need to have it, but they just don't know how to approach it? It's not necessarily a step-by-step guide, but maybe some thoughts to help them crystallize that approach.
I think that's a really good question, and it makes me think of any type of difficult conversation that needs to be had. I think first things first, breathe. Just take a big deep breath. It's really important. Be calm. I know it sounds cheesy, but really take a big deep breath and try to be calm. The next thing is perhaps write down what is your just 2 or 3 or 4 bullet points, really, really short, as to what are your key points that you want to get across. What are those key points? Write them down. Not a script, but write them down, because when you're in the midst of a tough conversation that's going on for like half an hour, and you're stressed out, it's easy to lose track of what it is that you originally wanted to cover. So write those things down and make sure that as you go through the conversation that you get through each one. So make sure that you have the full conversation. Don't have half a conversation. Have all of it. Get it out onto the table. The next thing is that beforehand, take each of those bullet points and just do the following stress test. And this will help you, and this will help your argument. Ask yourself, is the message that I'm getting across, is it just for my own personal benefit?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it for my own personal benefit and for the benefit of the other party and for the organization? And if all three of those hold true, then try to find a way to highlight how what you're asking for, whether that's something that needs to be given or something that needs to be changed, how it benefits everybody involved, so that it doesn't seem like you're coming to the table to just take. Yes, I'm going to take something, but I also think that there will be the following benefit.
Yeah, you need to find that win-win proposition.
It is. I mean, a win-win negotiation. That's what it is. You want to try and highlight how it is that all the parties to the conversation are actually going to win.
Mm-hmm. You know, the other thing that I think that you can do to prepare is, I recall very early on in my career, I had to send a lot of contentious emails. So it wasn't a face-to-face conversation. However,
who are you sending these contentious emails to?
Dealing with IT crises and having to respectfully, although that conflict wasn't with the boss, it was with a customer, and a customer, the contact person was a lot more senior than me.
A person of authority.
Major authority.
Yeah.
And so I was a junior IT technician, and I was sending emails to IT directors and senior IT executives. And so one of the things that I got taught by Dad was that you actually needed to take an email, put everything down, bullet form, and then you had to comb through it and remove the emotions. Because this is a professional context, you're not dealing with a romantic partner or a family member. You're actually dealing with a colleague. It's professional. So try and remove the emotions, and so that you deal with the facts. And that helped me a lot to deal with what was going on without now putting that person's character down or getting into anything that was right. This is what was done. This is what was not done. This is what we need to do. This is how we can work together. And that helped me to deal with those conflicts.
I love what you're saying. It's almost like keep it professional, don't make it personal.
100%.
Absolutely, because the second you go the personal route, you are going to trigger emotions, and
people are going to get defensive,
and not in a good way.
Exactly. You know, we've all seen those movies where, you know, you see especially in the rom-com, everything, they go to the therapist, and suddenly now the way that they have to talk to each other during conflict season becomes I feel and I feel. Unfortunately, sometimes we see people bring that into the work context, and it's not the same and it's not appropriate. Yes, you do have emotions and you do have feelings at work, and you still need to be cognizant of that up the line, down the line. However, if you're wanting to have a difficult conversation with your boss, you need to rather go in there with an objective point of view as opposed to a subjective point of view. You can have a primary base of it being completely objective and then say, listen, and I do want to add just a small little bit of emotion, but I understand that that's just in my emotions, and I'm willing to just also understand that I might need to grow in that area. So that your boss,
and you've labeled it as such. You're saying this is just a little mini vent. I'm just going to vent here, and then we're going to go back to a rational conversation.
Let's go back to rational, to objective, so that way your boss says, okay, I can still engage with you because you are still human. You do have feelings, but it's not I have feelings, and then so here's a little fact that caused it to go out of proportion.
But don't you think that there should be space for both? And there should be balance.
There should be balance.
Because what is work without any emotional feeling at all? Yeah. Is that not going to be just passionless?
But again, balance needs to be defined. Is balance 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 90-10?
Depends on the role, eh?
It highly depends on the role in the relationship and the function. Because if you've got somebody, let's say in finance, don't bring emotion into it's either did the client pay the bill or not. You can't say, well, I feel like they paid it. No,
the maths adds up or it doesn't.
It's ones and zeros. Client relationships, you might need to bring in a little bit more emotion. Listen, the client phone, they're very upset, and now you've got to have that conversation with your boss because you need to resolve something there. Okay, that's going to bring in a bit more emotion, but it shouldn't bring all of it in. So it's really around understanding when and how much to bring in so that you're cognizant of that.
So somebody says, listen, Carl, I want a promotion. I want an increase. How do they deal with that? In a constructive way, because it's a big one. It's probably the biggest, most it's probably the most contentious and popular conversation that should be had. It's out there.
So would you say a person, when they're wanting a promotion or an increase, should they come to you and be like, hey, listen, I feel like I deserve an increase? Or how should they go about that?
I think what's really important is they should go about it. You shouldn't avoid it, because what's going to happen, you get the quiet quitting, or eventually somebody's fuse just blows and then they lose their shit. That's not a good thing. It's important to talk to your boss about what's on your mind, but going in with, I feel I need a promotion, or I feel my job title needs to be adjusted, or I feel that my salary must be increased. I don't think it's enough. I think you need to bring more to the table. What you should be bringing is, I have done the following things, and I believe that sets me up for an adjustment in pay, and I think that the following title better reflects my duties. If I can do the following things going forwards, would you be able to make the following change? Enter into a trade. And don't just look back at what has been done and say, okay, now you owe me.
So it's actually almost like you're saying that to have that conversation, you go and do a little bit of homework, go and maybe look at your employment contract, go and look at what your job title was originally for, and then go look at what you've done over the last, say, 6 months to a year, and say, right, these things were part of my job function. I'm not going to bring those into the conversation because that's expected of me. However, these things were actually the next job level up. I've been doing those. I've been managing that. I've actually gone above and beyond. Not just I did more of the same. So bring that objectivity to the conversation and bring those facts. And then you can add in a small part of emotion to say, listen, but I have also built really great relationships. I've worked well. My colleagues enjoy working with me, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think something else that's really important when it comes to promotion-related conversations is, don't hardball on the first conversation. Don't. It's uncomfortable. It's stressful, and you're actually breaking relationship. So don't give a hardball ultimatum off the bat.
Yeah.
That's not a good place to start. It creates a rift and an uneasiness in the conversation.
Yeah.
Look, sometimes it can work, but I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
I would recommend rather being really clear about what you expect.
Yeah.
Let them think about it. If later on there's not a follow through, or you feel that there is no commitment, or the commitment is not being kept, then you can go play a little bit more hardball and say, listen, if you're not going to deliver on this part, then I'm going to need to explore other opportunities. And it's going to inspire trust, and it's going to build the relationship, and it's more likely to result in a better outcome. It has for me every time I've seen it happen, every time I've been confronted with it.
That makes sense.
It's really nice when someone comes to you and says, listen, these are the things I've done lately. I think they're valuable, and I want this promotion. If I can do the following things, can you give it to me?
Yeah.
Well, yes, if you do those things and just add that one extra, and we've got a deal.
Yeah.
Then you make a deal. Make a deal with your boss. They want to make a deal. They don't want to lose you.
Yeah.
Okay, Chase, what should an employee do when they are coming across another employee who's really rotten? They're full of shit. Okay? There's no other way to say it. How do they raise that issue up the line?
Well, I think first of all that when raising an issue about another colleague, you need to go about it quite carefully. You can't go in and just start pointing fingers. So you need to handle it quite diplomatically. You need to go in, be cognizant that that is another human being. But also at the same time, you need to speak to your boss and say, right, listen, there is this problem, and I can see these are the knock-on effects that it's causing. in that scenario, I know most of the times when you're having a difficult conversation, you should be solutions focused when you're going to your boss, because nobody, as a leader, nobody wants to just be like, okay, well, I've just received complaints and problems. I know for me personally, I like it when people come to me with solutions as well. Now, obviously, if there's a rotten apple in the business, you can't exactly say, well, I think the solution is to fire them. It's a little bit difficult. But you could actually say to them, listen, hey, this person is not pulling their weight. Can HR please go talk to them, or can you please go and have a word with them, because they're creating a miserable work environment, or they're bringing a bad energy. Whatever that thing is, you could say, listen, can you have a conversation with them, as opposed to, here's a problem, I don't like it.
Do you know what comes to mind? Is raise the issue. Okay, be specific about what are the things that are concerning you. Raise it as a concern, but raise it without making underlying foundational assumptions. Okay, so let's say, for example, you've got someone who's perhaps displaying a bad attitude at work. They're rude, they're abrasive, they're unhelpful, and they just don't have a great attitude. The assumption shouldn't be that that person woke up that morning and thought, how can I have a bad attitude today?
Yeah.
Should always go in with the mindset of, how can what's going on in that person's life? Is there something happening in their personal life?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe there's a family member who's sick. Maybe their spouse has lost the job. Once that concern's been raised and it's looked at, and there's a real heartfelt attempt to understand and resolve the underlying issue, and the attitude still is not coming right, well, then a lot of you must fire that person, because they're a blood-sucking vampire. It's almost like that analogy of, we're all rowing a boat, and we're trying to win a race while we're rowing a boat. That person who stops rowing, who's tired, maybe disgruntled about an unkept promise or something, you can kind of win that person back over. And that's what you should do. You should try and win them back over.
So what you're saying is that before you go and have that difficult conversation with your boss, try and understand what's going on with your colleague. If you really don't come right there, then you can go to your boss and say, hey, listen, I try to go and understand. I try to have talk to them while having coffee at lunchtime. They shut me down. They didn't let me in there. So I don't know what's going on. It's adding pressure to my life, because I'm having to pick up the ball for them. I'm having to cover for them with the client, or whatever the case is. Please, can you help me out and go and have a conversation with them and see if you can assist me? But I don't want to also, but I can get that might be difficult, because they don't want to be seen as the person that's pointing the finger and throwing your colleague under the proverbial bus. And so you can say to them, listen, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. I'm fielding extra pressure, or this is causing damage to the business.
Do you know what word is jumping to mind? Due diligence.
Yes.
Has that person done their due diligence before coming to the table and raising their issue with that other person?
Speaking of long-term wins about having that difficult conversation with your boss, being the person that raises the conversation and you now escalate it to your boss, you get a big win, because your boss is going to look at you with a different set of eyes. They're going to see you through a new set of lenses, where they will have a lot of respect for you if you've brought forward a really good, well-structured, non-emotional, fact-based, win-win, all those different dynamics we spoke about. You have that conversation in that light. They're going to look at you with more respect, and they're going to value your opinion, and that's going to help you long-term. Because when it comes to bigger topics that you might discuss, let's say you discuss something at a management meeting, and now you're within that management meeting, they're going to look to you and they're going to say, hey, what's your opinion? Because they know that you're not going to be shy to say, listen, I agree with that, I disagree with this respectfully, because have you thought about this and this? Your opinion, your thoughts, your mindsets are going to be much more appreciated, and they're going to be pulled into the organization, and you're going to be put ahead of your peers.
There's a certain courage, or there's guts in a person who can raise something, and leaders respect that. Absolutely. Leaders want to work with people that have got guts, and You know, even if you've raised something and you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, so there's still a win, because that you would have learned something, and you would have been more on the same page than what you were before the conversation started.
You touched on something really nice there, that you said that lesson, even if you've raised a difficult conversation, you didn't necessarily win. Also in how you handle that. If you end up becoming all upset and resentful and you don't move past it, your boss is also going to say, okay, so if you don't get your way now, you're upset. Whereas if you raise it, okay, listen, I was unable to convince you. Okay, move on. Cool, carry on. Business as usual. Your boss is going to say, okay, this person is resilient. They can still retain a positive mindset, still keep their A game going. They're going to appreciate that as well. And that's also a win for your career moving forward.
I've actually got quite an interesting example. I'm not going to mention any names, but the end outcome was very positive. So what happened was, I'm sure you know, with all the group online meetings, that there's this feature of raising your hand. And I find that feature to be quite useful, not because people must put their hands up before they speak, but rather as a tool to make sure that each person gets a chance to be heard without being interrupted, and that we can get all of the information to the table so that we can make good decisions, and nobody's left in a corner without an opportunity to talk.
Yeah.
And one person said to me recently in a session, but why don't I raise my hand in that session? And I said, well, because I'm chairing the session. And in this session, as it is, you can really see we're dealing with a contentious, difficult topic that has a sense of urgency. What she went on to say is that, then I'm not leading by example. And so I said, okay, that's fine. I hear where you're coming from, and we had to have a separate conversation. And I tried to unpack for her what does it look like from my side of the table. And the outcome of it was that we got to know each other better.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity to connect with this person some more, to understand what drives them, to learn about how that person wants to be communicated with. Okay, and that person also got to learn from my end why I feel it's so important for each person actually to be heard. But we built a relationship, and even today we continue to put a lot of effort in, and I have also been open to change my mind on other issues before. But we got into a groove of, hey, you've got an issue, you don't agree with something, you can raise it, come and raise it. Even if it means I need to change your mind, that's okay. Or you might change my mind, and that's okay. And that's good. And yeah, I think this is a really cool example.
So if anything, that person having that difficult conversation and facing that conversation with you, I assume it raised your level of respect for that person.
Big time.
That person was able to better align with your point of views. And so the working relationship overall improved, and whereas other persons would have not actually had the conversation. So they missed that opportunity. But it was done in a respectful way, it was done in an authentic way, and it was handled well from both sides.
Exactly.
Let's say you are having a difficult conversation with your boss and you step over a line, whatever that may be, whether that ends up being you either flick them out at a colleague, you throw them under the bus, or you have an emotional breakdown, whatever that form is, how do you come back from that? I think that the step one would be just owning it, to say, hey, listen, well, can we pause the conversation? I need a breather. I know for me, anytime somebody's had a conversation with me, if they've asked me for a breather, you don't attack them. And any good leader shouldn't attack them in that point. You should say, okay, cool. I'm willing to backtrack on the last 5 minutes or 2 minutes, or whatever part of that conversation. Allow them to compose themselves. Because if they're able to self-correct, damn, why would you want to then, you'd actually want to see that as a positive. Somebody that's able to self-correct, brilliant capability.
I think for me, I like to give people advice that I myself have used and that's worked for me. When I've chosen the wrong words, I like to say, I think I've just chosen the wrong words right now. Can you give me please a chance to backtrack, or can we park it and revisit this conversation again once my thoughts are more composed? But if possible, depending on how high the emotions are, try to reaffirm your commitment to solving the problem.
Yeah.
So I haven't chosen the right words. I'd really want to solve this problem. Let's revisit this. That can be very helpful. It's worked for me time and time again.
Yeah. The other area is that, let's say you're having that difficult conversation with your boss, and you're pressing and you're causing agitation. You should also know when to say, okay, listen, I'm not winning you over, and let's park it. So it's also about not trying to win that conversation, and rather say, listen, okay, you've had the conversation, we've moved this forward, it's been aired, and you're having the ability to also say, right, let's park it and let's come back to it another time.
Patience.
Patience.
Patience, yeah. When there's a conversation that needs to be had and you haven't had it for a while, it almost feels like a weight on your shoulders. And yes, it might be difficult to offload that weight and to confront the issue and go and say hello to the elephant in the room. You're going to feel lighter because that issue is no longer bottled up. That conflict is no longer avoided.
Yeah. Having that difficult conversation, it's a skill. The more you practice it, the better you get. And I promise you, you will always feel better after having it, provided you do it in a respectful and constructive way. So for the viewer that's been putting off that difficult conversation, I challenge you to go and have one difficult conversation every 2 weeks, whether that's with a colleague or your boss, and just see how it goes. And you will see your skills develop and progress. And 6 months' time, you'll be in a different space.
I think that difficult conversations is a skill. Having difficult conversations is a skill. And like any skill, practice makes perfect. The more of them you have, the better and better you'll get. So another thing you can also do, if this is something you really struggle with, is don't start at level 10. Maybe start at level 2 with conversations that are difficult but not that difficult.
Yeah.
Practice.
Start with lower risk conversations.
Lower risk conversations, yes. Whether that's at home or at work or wherever it might be. Because honestly, if you can get really good at having difficult conversations, you'll not only get better outcomes for your life, but you're going to have much better relationships, and you'll be able to bring a lot more value to those relationships. If you have any questions around having difficult conversations with your boss, pop it in the comments and I'll personally reach out and give you some advice.
Look, if nobody spoke up at .active, we would probably be 10 years behind as a business, and we would not have some of the amazing things that we have in place today. Just look at our maternity and paternity policy. Somebody spoke up about it. Our policy was archaic. It was terrible. Our people spoke up. We said, okay, right, listen to them. Let them put a policy together, designed by the people, for the people. And I personally think it's probably
it was done so nicely as well.
It was done well. They didn't point fingers and say, well, the old policy was shit. They just said, no, listen, the old policy is not quite cutting it. How can we look after expecting moms and expecting dads within the business better?
And the way it was raised was so compelling and convincing, actually inspiring, because it was done privately. Okay, so without a blame game. It was done without making the assumption that the business doesn't want to excel in this area. There was a willingness to go and do research, and there was a clear and conscious understanding that whatever policy we put in place has to be commercially beneficial to the business. And we put all of those together, and we came up with a very forward-thinking maternity and paternity policy. Some key takeaways: prepare, but don't over-rehearse. Don't get yourself into a tiz and get your mind all spun up. Don't do that. Rather jot down a few bullet points, be clear about what it is you want to get across and what each party will get from what it is that you're asking for or what it is that you're wanting to resolve, so that everybody wins rather than it being something that is purely just for your own benefit only.
Keep it professional. Try and remove the emotions. Make sure that you bring a win-win to the table, or bring a solutions-based argument or conversation to the table, so that way you can have a constructive conversation. Difficult, but constructive.
Next one is always listen and give grace. One of the tricks that I find has been really helpful for communication is when somebody says something to you, briefly repeat back what you think you heard them say, rather than listening to respond straight away.
And remember, you don't have to completely win the conversation of the day. You can also get to the point where you haven't necessarily won, but you can then handle that response in grace, and rather than allow that to just move forward over time.
Another key takeaway is be future orientated about the conversation. Yes, lay the foundation of what happened in the past and what needs to be solved, or the justification for why you need to get what you need to get. That's all good and well, but be future orientated and do a trade-off, make a deal rather than just making a demand.
Yeah. A difficult conversation is a skill that can be honed in on, and you can improve it. So don't shy away from it. Tackle it head on.
Practice makes perfect. And sometimes baby steps will get you comfortable.
100%.
Thanks for giving this a listen. If you watched up until this point, then chances are there is a difficult conversation that you're avoiding, so don't avoid it. Go and have that conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like or drop a comment in the comment section below.
And if you'd like to see more content like this, subscribe to our channel for future episodes.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Cheers.